All right. And then if you would let me know, especially because it did just change, what your title is now.
So now I'm president of what's called Armstrong Company Global, the Armstrong Company Global Services. Armstrong is the name of the company based out of Memphis, Tennessee. They are the largest member of what's called the Unigroup organization, but they're about a $400 million company doing transportation services throughout the United States and the world. And I'm in charge and a shareholder in the company that is the international provider for services within the organization. So anything that leaves the country, be it personal effects or commercial goods, commercial what we call commercial project cargo, things like office installations, laboratories, medical equipment, hospitals moving back and forth, things of that nature. Our division handles all of that. And so
Wonderful.
it's
So this
exciting.
is when somebody's going to relocate. You're the guy they call to
Correct.
help them with that. Yeah.
That's right. Or if there's another example, if there's a professor at LMU who says, "Oh, I've got a job to work at the University of Milan for a year, but I need to take my laboratory with me," we would relocate the lab and handle that and ship it over and get it through and set up and so he or she could do his or her work any other place in the world and then move it back. And we actually do a lot of, believe it or not, there's a lot of professors who move their laboratories. And I had no idea, but there are. So but things of that nature as well.
Interesting. All right. Well, backing up then, tell us, why did you do a PhD to begin with? What was your original sort of out of the box
The
intent?
original reason was it was a bucket list item. I really wanted to do this, but I also I love learning and I wanted to explore the profession that I was in at an academic level that let me become more authoritative in discussions and learning how things taking someone's word for, oh, that just happens that way. I like to ask the question, well, how do you know that? What's the evidence? Show me the evidence. And the PhD was a program that taught me how to show you the evidence, how to try and find the evidence and to uh, I hate to say it made me more cynical, but it taught me how to ask better questions and ask, so, well, show me what are the statistics say and how did you do it? Tell me the methodology and really explore the reasons why. Not because I have distrust or doubts, but I said in order to really demonstrate that anyone has evidence, you need to know, was there a robust way in which they discovered this evidence? When there is, I come in, well, then I believe you more. Otherwise, I have no idea. I just take it for granted. I said, well, then we can all make up stories, right? We can all say this, show me something that tells me how you got to this point. And without that, and they can't. And I always wanted to be able to explain to them through the research, through others that say, hey, don't take my word for it. I'm saying this because this is what happens. And just last week, I asked a gentleman who was presenting to our group regarding how people make decisions and how we all do our gut and we all think in heuristics. So I asked him, I said, well, you're familiar with the writing of Daniel Kahneman? And he said, I know a little bit about it. So I suggest you read his book, Thinking Fast and Slow, because he talks about this very thing that we use heuristics and gut instinct that we all call, but in reality, we're constantly evaluating and then thinking afterwards through these processes. And the more we do, the more analytical processes we use to make decisions and start figuring things out and put together the data and everything. But that all feeds into the next time into our gut and our heuristics. And I said, so we're constantly building up these very fast ways to make decisions and inferences, but we do so with data on the back end most often. So I said, this is what it's all about, thinking fast and thinking slow. And you need both of these to make decisions, realizing that in business, you often have to think faster, you're going to lose. And I lose out. You don't, someone else decides to make the decision before you do. And you have to be able to understand that both are important. But when it's important, really important, you'll need to move with speed. And that's
Yeah.
anyway, we will discuss that and talk about that and demonstrate if there's research into this and that there's real good laid background. And he said, no one has ever asked me that type of question before, but thank you very much for asking it. Uh,
Well, that's great. So then you did the program and were very successful in it. And what did you hope would happen after you completed the PhD? Like, were you hoping to go into teaching or more research, or what was sort of your
I
intent?
wanted to do more research, and because in the field that I'm in, there's not a lot of research that has been done, and they finally created a journal, but only in 2013, so it's not like it's really old, called the Journal of Global Mobility. And there is research, more and more research being done, and the field is growing. And I did speak to some professors, interestingly enough, at Cranfield University in the UK, which seems to be a hotbed for researchers in the field, and spoke to a couple different people that colleagues in the industry put me in touch with, who I read and had articles and I referenced in my dissertation. So my goal was to, I wouldn't mind eventually teaching when I kind of stopped doing regular working, but it was going to be something that comes afterwards. But I really wanted to use it to research, to be very truthful. I want to be able to demonstrate to my customers that we have thought out things further along than others, and say, hey, we're looking at this in a very scientific way and trying to put together the pieces that would make you want to do business with us, because we understand the process and what's going on beyond just the service delivery, but to help people through the entire experience of expatriation and repatriation, and help them along to be adjusted and to be ready for it and to be prepared so that they succeed. And if we can do that, my company can be benefited by that in terms of gaining business, but also it's a personal desire to see people succeed when they go overseas. I having done this, I cannot tell you how great the experience is, and I want people to enjoy that and make that part of their lives. And I thought, why not do that and try and make some money doing it at the same time? So that's what I was
Right.
hoping to get out of it. But for research, eventual teaching. But I passed that point in my career as I get to kind of the end of the traditional workspace. I wouldn't mind doing, like I said, some after retiring or semi-retiring, but I'm still loving what I do. So, but I want to bring it into the workplace and leverage it for that's something that's never been done.
Right. Well, that's great because that's actually really applicable to what a lot of the DBA students are also facing this thought that, well, maybe I'll teach, but you're actually doing, research in your field and very much applying it on a day-to-day basis.
No question.
And your unique perspective as both a customer of these services as well as someone who provides these services gives you probably a really great research lens because you can spot gaps and spot potential research questions on a daily basis.
Exactly. It's like this, like the concept of what I want to do next is things that I've never thought people would spend money on. And it's like, why are they spending money on those things? That just seems like less important. But who am I to say what's important or not is, but you're starting to say, why would you do this? We never did it in the past. And but it's, that's the question. Why is it important? And how important is it? And the one thing I want to do, I said to Doug Allen, uh uh my chair, was that I want to do something where I either do a mixed methods, which we all know is tough, or I do something that's analytical, because I doing something that's purely qualitative is so hard. I said, I want to do some math. Let me do some things that have math oriented. I said, but nonetheless, he said, Dale, don't forget this is social science, and social means between people. And he said, he said, he kind of said, you may want to really look at that mixed methods if you can start off in one way, but bring in the statistical analysis at the same time, because so much of social science moves and is amorphous over time, and trends change, people's tastes change, things move, new priorities arise. And so he said, social science is generally time oriented. So things that were that way in the 60s are not that way in the 2020s. And so you have to realize people's mores and expectations and beliefs and why they do things shift along that continuum. So he said, nonetheless, he said, yeah, I get it. It's a lot easier to run things through a program than it is to sit and read through transcript after transcript of people's beliefs. But I said, you do what you have to do.
Well, and your topics, though, are very inductive in nature because there isn't a body of theory for you to pull from
There's
and
not.
test either. So if you're creating theory, you kind of got to do qualitative. You got to start from the ground and
There's
hear
no
what people
question.
say.
No
Yeah.
question. And he said, look, you're to the point where you're still asking lots and lots of questions. And he said, maybe you're going to be the guy who says, here's how you can create a good survey to be done. But he said, right now, you're probably not, and I've done a little bit of research already. There's not a great thing. Oh, I did this survey on things. There's nothing really applicable yet that I have found. It doesn't mean it's not there, but I haven't found it. And I am in the process of joining what's called the DU community. I'm not sure if you're aware of it, but it still hasn't set up to me. And I'm talking to Amy Murphy, and she's saying, Dale, I don't know what's taking so long, but because I said I just want access to the library and everything, because I don't have access to do the things I want to do. And I said I'm happy to use DU as my platform, and if I can get published in one of these, to say I'm through University of Denver, I don't have any problems with that. But I said I just need to be able to go in and get access to the library and all the articles and everything through the system. So hopefully they'll get that set up for me.
Yeah. And then tell us about this new research question. So, well, first, actually, tell us about the dissertation. What did you study? And now the second piece that you're hoping to
So
do
my
now.
dissertation was how do born global companies utilize the expatriate assignment to grow and expand their businesses? And what we found was that the young companies are growing very quickly, and they look at the expat assignment as one of two things. Either they use it as they need to get someone over there so they have it quickly. But what we found that was most exciting was some of these companies that are now past their first few years are to recruit the right talent and retain talent. They're offering people the opportunity to go overseas, be an expat, mostly on a one-way assignment. So it's like, hey, Kelly, if you want to go to Japan, we can do it, but we'll send you, but there's no specific time frame or comeback. You kind of take your chances. They do it in a very budget conscious way, and they limit what they do, but they have found that by doing this, the talent says, oh, if I don't do it here, maybe I should go somewhere else. They're trying to retain talent, and it works to about 2 to 3 years of additional retention they can have by sending this talent overseas and letting them have that experience. And so the young companies are utilizing it both to expand where they are, but at the same time is keep talent in place. And if they can't keep them here, keep them in the organization by sending them somewhere else where they'd rather be, at least for a period of time. And so the companies had pretty consistent benefits on how they do that. But at the same time, they do run their traditional programs, but they're very limited. They're not like they're not like the typical IBMs or Microsofts who have people all over the world at very high levels. They've got 6 or 7 people around the world at high levels, and that's it. The rest are all these young, kind of ambitious, uh, predominantly in the tech field of people wanting to do things overseas. Although I had another one. It technically is technical, but they're graphic designers for a game company, and I found these guys to be really interesting because the contact said to me, for example, if we get the right person who can draw a samurai sword and do this really well, so we'll do whatever it takes to get that person to join our organization. If that means, oh, ooh, can I go live in Japan then? Yeah, go live in Japan, study samurai swords because we need that in these games. And they would send those people over there if that's what they thought got them the best possible talent. So it was clearly a talent retention tool, but also a growth and expansion. And it was I wouldn't say it was completely eye-opening because I kind of expected a lot of this, but it did confirm many of the thoughts that I had and what I believe was the case. Very few things were kind of, wow, I never expected that. But I was a little bit surprised at how economically oriented some of these companies were. Been in an industry where someone says, oh, it's $1 million to send someone overseas for 3 years. is a far cry when someone says, "Oh, we spend 25 grand, and that's it." He's like, 25 grand, they can barely buy tickets for that, you know. But
Exactly.
that's what they do because people are willing to run and do this, but they want that experience. And talking to the assignees who've done it, the ones I spoke to, it was all about I really wanted this experience. I wanted to live. And some of them came to the U.S. Some others were living in Spain, and they just wanted to go overseas. They just wanted to that experience overseas, and this is what got them there.
Well, that's really great too. And again, I can see why you would do a qualitative interview because it's wide open space. You don't know
Oh,
what they're going to
quite
say.
proven,
So
you know.
that's, yeah. And now what about this latest idea?
The latest idea is now we are seeing in the industry a growth in what we call the lump sum allocations, which means people are just given money and have to make the decisions on their own, but they're guided by a little bit of help from their organizations. So what I want to find out is, what's the high priority for the individuals who all of a sudden leave what we call a corporate sponsored relocation and all of a sudden are more like what's called a self-initiated assignment or a consumer purchase. So you behave very differently when money transfers to your own control. Or let's put it this way: the decisions you make when money comes to your own control are not necessarily the same value propositions that your organization has on your behalf. You get to determine, well, do I really need help finding a home or getting something signed, or do I need to pay for a translator? If I speak Spanish and I'm being relocated to Spain, why would I spend money for all this translation when I can read it myself? So is that money mine, or should I give it back? And no one gives it back. They all want to keep it. But what I want to find out is, what's your high priority? What's the reason for it? Are there reasons behind how you spend this money? And for someone whose business is about helping people physically relocate, do they say, look, I once I get this money, I just need a few things, but before I would have shipped more things if someone else was paying, and that wasn't how I had to spend it. And so where's a sweet spot? Where can I find that number that I, as an organization and enterprise, want to hone in on and say, if you're only going to spend $4,500 on physically relocating instead of the 9 to 10,000 that your company would spend, how do I find a way to get your 4,000 some dollars? Because I want that money spent with me to do things. And so what do I need to do to attract you in and hold you to make that purchase with me? Because I know when you get an allocation, you're probably going to spend about that much money on the services that I can offer, and then on other services along the way that I can, and if I can't, so be it. I don't do, in Spain, I don't do the home finding, but we have programs here in the States where we would do that type of service. So, but I still want to know how you spend the money. What's the most important to you? And then country by country, or some countries, uh, is the psychic distance such that you'll spend the money, or is the psychic distance so small that you don't need to spend the money? So again, if you move to England and you're an American, or you're a Brit moving to Australia, you can say, look, I can get along. The psychic distance is so small, I can make all this work. I don't need someone. You move to Japan, you might want to have some help because the psychic distance is that much further. And what are the
Yeah.
values that you have according to which services might be offered, and where do you spend that money? I want to find out, how does a consumer spend the money once it's in their own pocket, and on what types of services, what types of benefits are driving the spend decisions. And right now that's speculative, but we need to do more research and see what it is today. That may change over time, but what is it right now? There's a lot of guessing in the industry, and especially in service providers who have no idea. They're just throwing things against the wall. Where's the money spent? Is it even worth trying to find the individuals who do that and bring some of that to us where we can get that spent on our with our organization? So that's the research. And And I
Wow,
think
it's
a
very,
lot of
very
people,
practical for your job
yeah,
because you clearly can use this information and monetize it, you know. But I
absolutely.
love when you just dove for a moment there into the theory too, because you said, no, and what is the element? Is it psychic distance? Is that one of the variables that's going to impact this? And, you know, there you started to kind of dig back to the theories that you know, explored in this.
In the end, all that comes back because when people say, "Well, why do you do it?" And there's theory that locks all that into place. Usually, there is reasons that some people think, "Well, that's obvious." I said, "Well, it's obvious because people have found out about it. It wasn't obvious to, and you know, you need to define it, put fences around it into what are the boundaries, as we know, what does it, what can it do, what can't it do, and yeah, establish what that is. But I think it'll be very interesting to do that work. And I'm just, that's I'm beating that with and Doug said he would love to be part of that. So I thought that was great. And hopefully we'll get this lined up and begin to work on it. And I should be able to get that integrated well within my job in terms of time spent because it's valuable to what I do.
Yeah, that's great. I love that that you're actually able to kind of carve out time to do it because you can justify it with the financial piece, but then getting it published can't hurt either, right?
Oh, and I had a specific, interestingly enough, when I made this agreement, you can imagine what contracts are like, and it's fairly straightforward. But I had to put down specifically. I said, look, as a researcher, as a professional researcher, I will continue to do this, and I want you to know that the research and its products are my decisions on how to do them. You are welcome to, I will share them with you within the job. But I said, you do not own them because they will eventually be published and they become public domain. And I said, so you can use them all you want. It's like anyone else as a reference. But I said, it's not a product in which you can use to say, well, I'm gonna, yeah, everyone gets. I said, there's no money in this, guys. I said, there's a little bit of glory here, but there's not any money. And I said, so, but clearly, this will be me as an author, and will not credit the organization as an author. I will footnote that I work in the organization, and that's part of what I do as disclosure. But I said, you won't own anything. And they were, okay, we don't know how that works, but it sounds all right. Go ahead. And they were very accommodating in that regard to say, no, great. And hey, if you can make it work and we can utilize it as part of our overall, hey, we have a guy running our company, our international, who's a researcher and now published in the world, and they love it, so that's great. I said, we'll see what happens, but they're very much on board saying, do what you have to do. It's your daily, run the company as you see fit, work as much as what you want, and research as much as you want, and just bring us what we need every year. So that's
That's
that's our bottom
fantastic.
line. So, yeah, and I've got
So,
good take
switching
care of
gears
things.
to skill. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I've good people who can take care of things, so I can spend some time doing other things.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. So switching gears a little, the skills that you learned in the program, have you been able to apply them? I mean, obviously the research piece, but are there other things that you learned that you're able to apply?
I think there's a lot of organizational activities and things and how we work and interact, how we create a positive environment. So much of what I learned is I see either in my current employment or in the past when I was in just beforehand, on how some of the dynamics work between leadership, what is good leadership, what was not so good leadership. There's a lot of what not to do's that got presented. And so funny. I would talk to my former colleagues, and I'd say everything the behavior here is very classic. There's nothing that hasn't been seen before. And I said there's a lot of research on this type of leadership, and I said it's a little bit that's unfortunate because it's not the best positive style. I said we have a little bit of people protecting themselves, a lot of keeping people in the dark, and it's not servant leadership. It's not a bold leadership in any way. It's a lot of fear and a lot of lack of understanding of what it takes to make people part of a winning solution. And so yeah, and then they would, Dale, what's going to happen next? You know everything. I said, no, I don't know everything, but I can tell you how people behave, and this is a classic behavioral pattern that you will see. And yeah, there were numerous different things that I have found from the program that I applied. I've always been pretty good at working Excel, but I now can run stats and say, hey, I know why I can say what I say about, this is 3 deviations outside the norm. This is never going to fly, guys. This is so far off that it's just not making any sense. And in fact, the job before this one that I was working for, I had a real struggle with statistical analysis because the gentlemen who were trying to make decisions would not accept my statistical analysis as the veracity of the situation. And I said, guys, I'm not making up the numbers. I'm telling you what I see based upon the assumptions you've provided. This is the result. And I said, just because you don't like it doesn't make it not true. And so, but there's some other things into that are very interesting, but probably shouldn't be in the recorded interview.
I was just thinking that. But it sounds like, in addition to the statistical prowess, which is, an obvious feature of having to use different methods for different studies, but also the fact that you had to read seminal work from each of these literature streams, even ones that weren't necessarily your focus area, it turns out were helpful to you then, because you could,
Absolutely.
pull things and models from those different areas.
Everything that we learned in the program, I can honestly say pretty much everything goes back. I can tell you I have seen it, I've experienced it, I have used it as a tool to assess my own kind of place in the organization, the dynamics around me. And unfortunately, I think you can't help but start, I don't want to say critiquing, but analyzing everything that goes around and say, I've read why you do this. I know why this happens. I can see this. I can see the research, and I start thinking about some of the terminology and why we did things this way. And uh, I remember back to like one of the first possible things we read about the term of the commitment, being committed to something and knowing you should stop. And it was like, guys, it's time to give up. It's time to
Escalation of commitment.
escalation of commitment. And I said, it's
Yeah.
time to give up. It's not going to happen. Cut your losses. And I said, there is so much research about escalation of commitment. I said, come on, come on. And a lot of decision making, and I find that to be most interesting is why people make the decisions they make. And again, it's not that I question the decision, it's how did you come to that decision? I don't necessarily agree or disagree, but I said, what tools did you use? How did you determine to assess this? In fact, I'm going to be doing a presentation at the end of the month in Arizona at our partners meeting. I'm going to be using a couple examples about people and say, hey, what would you choose between this A and B, and see if I can figure out why they make these choices. And say, are you a risk taker, not a risk taker? Are you someone who's willing to make an informed, educated guess, or is there rationale? What makes you choose this or that? And again, go back to all the things we had, and look, I won't claim I have it all memorized. I certainly don't, but I know when something happens, and I have I have a shelf of everything we've done. I don't know how you work it, but I have actually 2 shelves of all the papers, all the articles that I printed out, or the ones I didn't print out are still on my computer. I can go out and find, each class and say, what did we study something on this, and go back and find it. So every so often my wife comes in and says, what are you doing? I said, I'm just looking up something. I know we studied this, and trying to find it. A lot of the stuff on the qualitative analysis that we had, I'm using that all the time. I'm trying to figure out how to do that work and how to make those distinctions and how to categorize things, and it has changed my outlook on my profession and on my relationships with people professionally, not for the, I would say better or worse, but it's made me ask questions and ask people to please support what it is they're saying. And I said, I just give me reasons. Tell me why. Give me the background, because I don't, not that I don't trust you, but I said, please help me. I'm willing to trust, but Show me. Why should I? Because it's like a child. You can't, as a child, and a parent can say, because I said so, that ends it. That doesn't work. Adult to adult. The I said so just doesn't cut it. So help me understand why I should believe this is the way we should do something or not do something, or what's the rationale. And give me some background with the theory that is behind it, and what you base it on. And it annoys a lot of people. They kind of like, why are you asking all this? Well, I just want to know. I said, come on, I'm not saying your decision's bad. Do you know why you made this decision? I said, I have some ideas of why you might have made it, but maybe I'm thinking differently. So, and some people really enjoy it. I mean, there's a lot of people who look at you and say, oh, PhD, you must read people's minds. I said, no, I read a lot of articles, but not minds. I said, guys, I said, the simple fact is human beings behave in patterns. And I said, no matter what you do, I said, by and large, people behave in similar patterns. And you can predict those patterns if you do enough analysis and understand their reasons for them. And I said, what we're trying to do back full circle is predict those patterns on how they'll make a decision on purchasing and spending their money. And we want to be right there when they make that decision to spend their money. I said, if we can do that, our organization will benefit and we will proceed forward and advance what we're trying to do. All I'm trying to do is find a predictable pattern that puts us at the right place at the right time. I said, it's not, and many people do this without even thinking, but I said, if you put a little bit of work into it, you might even be better.
Yeah, completely agree. Well, that's wonderful. So what professional advice do you have for current doctoral students in a program? They're midway through the program when they get to my class. So what would
I,
you say they need to think about professionally?
I think if it depends on the time they are in their lives. If their whole dream is to be a instructor, professor, that's great. I think that kind of advice, I would say, if that's your passion, do it. But I would think you study this stuff, and if you're going to pursue this, I think it's good to have a foundational belief of what do you want to do with this? How do you want to apply it? And you said it before, and I would agree. How do you monetize this? This is not a cheap investment. So how do you monetize the benefit of this? And as much as I was very fortunate at that right time uh, to make it all feasible and do it all, but I said, in the end, I said to my wife, I said, I want to use this and I want to recoup my investment. I said, and there's ways I can do this that are both immediate, but in the future and setting the stage. And I said, I can do a lot of it right now, but I said, I want to be able to monetize this and use this in what I do for a living. And I think I'm doing that. I think I'm making progress towards that. Um, there's a little bit of credibility one gets as a PhD, uh, but there's also a lot of responsibility to explain why what I say has any value and why I have some authority, because I said it's not because of who I am, it's because of who I have studied and who else has come before me. And I'm staying on those shoulders to say, here's what I see, because I'm on the shoulders of other people who've done a lot of work to uncover what happens. And I said, guys, I learned one thing. One thing they drive into you as a PhD student is very few people are going to write the next theory of relativity. I said, we're all trying to move the base of knowledge a small increment forward. And I said, but with many small increments, great glaciers move downhill. And I said, all I'm trying to do is say, can I be part of that increment? And how can I apply it to what I do and where I'm working? And because in the end, that's where my passion is. It's what I do for a living. And I want to see people in this area say, hey, that makes sense. Let's go make some money doing this. And that's what I want to do. And I think if you're a student, you got to look, where can I make an impact and how can I utilize this knowledge and this capability and the skills you gain on how to do this? Guys, we need people in every facet to figure out what's going on and how to move things forward and how the next new things that are coming along, we all have to deal with. When I was young, we didn't have social media, we didn't have all these kind of things, all these new drivers of things are impacting in my world how people interact and spend money to get things accomplished. And so I want to be where it is in social media, where it is in print media, where it is in geography of how these decisions get made and how that money will be moved and circulated so that I can get my share of it. And again, you got to research and figure that out.
Well, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. This has been very, very helpful and quite a unique perspective from some of our other classmates too. So I think that this is really very, very valuable. And again, I love that you're applying these models in your everyday work in a way that, not a lot of people, I think, get an opportunity to do. Just like, we were unique as students because we all came to this with different perspectives in the workforce and different research questions. And so it's really been something you've been able to leverage and turn it into hopefully something that you can monetize for your organization.
Yeah, I hope so. I think it's funny. I keep going back. Heather asks me this all the time. She says, "Well, has everyone finished up?" And I said, "I think most everybody has."